Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. I welcome you to our weekly session on the Bhagavad Gita as it is. So we have been reading chapter 6, and in the previous weeks we have read about how the Dhyana Yoga has to be performed, and we read about few details of how that yoga has to be performed, like what should be the seating arrangement, which is it shouldn't be very high or it shouldn't be too low, and what should be the posture of the person who is doing the yoga. His eyes shouldn't be too open or it shouldn't be too closed, because it would deviate him from the focus which he needs to perform the yoga, and ultimately his mind should be controlled. His mind shouldn't ponder about anything which is relating to sense gratification, and finally he should have his full attention on Lord Krishna, and thus performing this particular yoga, then he would be able to attain his shelter or the shelter of Lord Krishna. So we would continue to understand the details of what all regulations we need to follow if we need to perform any kind of yoga. And it is very important to understand these instructions, because these instructions are relevant for any form of yoga, whether it be Dhyana Yoga, whether you need to be have a certain level of discipline so that you can perform the yoga. So let's begin. Today's verse, we would start from verse 16. So it reads, Nati ashnatas tu yogosti nacha ekantam anashnataha nachati swapnashilasya jagrato nevacharjunaha. So this means that there is no possibility of one becoming a yogi, O Arjuna, if one eats too much or too little, sleeps too much or does not sleep enough. So this is in continuation to the discipline or the disciplinary action one should train oneself in, so that one can perform the yoga. So one thing is, so here it mentions about, here Lord Krishna is mentioning about that one should control his eating and one should also control his sleeping, because if one goes too much or too little of it, then he cannot perform yoga. So the meaning of this verse is pretty clear. Now His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada had further elaborated on this particular verse, and he mentions that what we should eat. So we should only eat, so the first level of instruction is we should only sustain on grains, we should sustain on vegetables, we should sustain on fruits and milk and other milk products. We shouldn't eat animal products, and by animal products I mean meat, eggs, flesh or fish. So we should try to avoid these articles, because first of all, scientifically we have found, or scientifically it has been found, that our entire the whole digestive system of a human being is much more closer to a digestive system of a herbivorous animal. So our one similarity or one trait of similarity is that our the digestive system of the herbivores and digestive systems of human beings are too long in nature. So so it is very long, so the food stays in the digestive tract or the digestive system for a longer duration of time. So if we eat things like grains or fruits or vegetables which doesn't rot very easily within the digestive system, so it can stay in the digestive system for long. But if we eat products like fish, meat or eggs, that rots very easily, and if it stays in the digestive system for too long, which it generally does, because the way our digestive system is made, that it goes through a slow transformation, it goes through a slow absorption of nutrients. So because it's if those products are consumed and it stays in the digestive system for too long, then it rots and it causes slow degradation of the digestive system and brings many diseases. So that is the scientific backing of why we should only subsist on grains, vegetables, fruits and milk products. Now the another thing is, from the Ayurvedic point of view, these foodstuffs are sattvic in nature, grains, fruits, vegetables, and the foodstuffs like meat, fish, egg are tamasic in nature. So these foodstuffs should be these are rajasic in nature. So these foodstuffs should be avoided, because if one is trying to perform in yoga, so he needs to uplift himself to the sattvic and the Shuddha sattvic stages, nor one should degrade oneself to the rajasic or tamasic, because the food we eat is gives us not only nutrients, but it also changes our state of mind. So that's why we need to eat sattvic food. So that is the first level of instruction that one should get from this verse, which His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada has kindly elaborated on. The next thing is that we have also read in the previous chapters that we should only take food which is offered to Lord Krishna, because the food which is offered to Lord Krishna becomes prasadam, and the prasadam means it is sanctified. It no longer stays a normal foodstuff, it becomes blessed with the mercy of Lord Krishna, and that is why we should eat food which is only offered to Lord Krishna. So this is how a bhakti yogi can control what he eats or what should he eat. And then eating too little. So now if we eat, we have eating, and then there are stages when we don't eat, like we have Ekadashi and when we do fasting. So there is this regulation of when do we eat and when we don't eat. For example, this Chaturmasya going on, then in Chaturmasya we don't, in the first month of Chaturmasya we don't eat leafy vegetables. So these kind of regulations are there which are mentioned in the scriptures, and we should follow those regulations, because those regulations are scientific in nature, and thus it regulates our eating. And not that we manifest or we come up with our own ways of fasting or dieting, which adversely affects not only our body but also our spiritual practices. For example, we start dieting and we start skipping a meal or two, then at some point of day we would feel more hungry, and rather than focusing on the work or the important aspect on focusing on God, we would be focusing on when we would be eating and what we would be eating. So that's why eating should be controlled. And then similarly for sleeping also, there is a regulation that in Ayurveda it has been mentioned that one should sleep for a maximum of 6 hours, because if one sleeps for more than that, then again one goes into or one's state of mind goes into rajasic or tamasic mode. The tamasic mode means ignorance or laziness or not. So these passive attitude comes with the tamasic mode, which is characterized by sleeping too much. So in this way, eating and sleeping should be balanced. And also there are further inscriptions in Ayurveda that if you sleep between, if you go to bed between 10 and 12, or between 9 and 12, so those 2-3 hours of sleep counts, it actually doubles up. So between 9 and 12, if you sleep, it becomes like 3 hours becomes 6 hours, okay. And then if you sleep between 12 and 3, then those hours are like 3 hours are equal to 3 hours. Then if you then the sleep between 3 and 6 a.m. in the morning is equal to 1.5 hours. So in this way you can maximize your sleep if you want to, if you sleep by 9 or 10. So that is the best option. But maybe due to our profession or due to our engagements, we cannot sleep at that moment. But we should try to minimize sleep. We should try to control our sleep, and we should try to control our eating habits. So verse number 17, yukta ahara viharasya yukta cheshtasya karmasu yukta swapnava bodhasya yogo bhavati dukkha. So this means that he who is regulated in his habits of eating, sleeping, recreation and work can mitigate all material pains by the practicing of yoga. So again a similar instruction is provided here, that we should, if we regulate our eating, sleeping and all the activities, then we would be able to properly practice any form of yoga, and we would thus, by performing of yoga, we would be able to mitigate our material pains. Verse 18, yada viniyatam chittam atmani eva avatishtate nispriha sarva kamebhyo yukta iti uchyate tada. Now another important instruction. When the yogi, by practice of yoga, disciplines his mental activities and becomes situated in transcendence, devoid of all material desires, he is said to be well established in yoga. So again, there is the importance is laid on your controlling or disciplining your mental activities, and you have to, if you control all your mental activities, in this way you would be able to be situated in the correct stance, or you would have the correct consciousness, and thus you would be able to perform the yoga. So now an advantage which is there, a big advantage which is there in bhakti yoga, is that through all your activities which you perform in your throughout the day or throughout your life, you can engage in the service of Lord Krishna, or you can perform it in the mood of yoga. So in this way you would be able to discipline your mental activities, which is mentioned here, very easily if you perform bhakti yoga. So a description or an example of how we can perform this yoga or the bhakti yoga through our day in day out activities is mentioned by quoting by Srila Prabhupada had quoted a verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, which narrates about a very famous devotee of Lord Krishna, so who is King Ambarish. So we would hear about him when we start reading Srimad Bhagavatam, but as of now we can just read these verses. So here it says that Savai Mana Krishna Padara Vindayo. So that says this means that by mind King Ambarish always used to think about the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Then what he used to do? Vachamsi Vaikuntha Guna Anuvarnani. So Vachamsi means to speak by words. Then it says Vaikuntha Guna Anuvarnani. So narrating the glories of Vaikuntha. So that is how he used to engage his words in the service. Then Karau Harer Mandira Marjanadishu. So that means by his hands he used to clean the temple. Harer Mandira Marjanadishu. So Marjana means to clean. And then Shrutim Chakara Achyuta Sat Kathodaya. That means he used to engage his ears in hearing about the glories of Lord Hari. And then it further says that Mukunda Lingalaya Darshane Drishau. So that means that Mukunda Lingalaya means the temple or the form of Mukunda, Darshana Drishu. So taking darshana of the form of Lord Mukunda. Then Tadbhritya Gatra Sparshe Anga Sangamam. So that means that by by touching the feet or by embracing the devotees of Lord. So Tadbhritya means devotee of Lord Mukunda, Gatra Sparshe Anga Sangam. And Ghranam Chatat Pada Saroja Saurabhe. So he used to smell the flowers which have been offered to the feet of Lord. So this way we can see that how all the senses can be engaged in the service of the Lord, and thus by engaging all the senses in the service of the Lord, it becomes very easy to to focus your mind on Lord, and to get rid of all the mental speculations that keep on going in your mind. We all understand that if we have to perform something or if we have some responsibility, we will do it, but we won't overthink about it, because the most of our time we are spending, if we follow these injunctions, then we will do our work, we will do our day-to-day duties, we will meet our responsibilities, but again the rest of our time we would engage our various senses as much as possible in the service of Lord. So in this way, this verse gives a practical way of how we can follow the instructions. Verse 19. Yatha dipo nivatastho nangate sopama smrita yogino yata chittasya yunjato yogamatmanah. So this verse gives an example that as a lamp in a windless place does not waver, so the transcendentalist whose mind is controlled remains always steady in his meditation on the transcendental self. So the example is pretty clear that if one's thought is, if one is fully focused on Lord Krishna, or through all his activities he is always serving the Lord, or he is in this connection with the Lord, then that is like a lamp which doesn't waver. Okay, so just we have seen, if the lamp there is no wind, then it doesn't waver. So similarly, if we have our senses engaged in the service of the Lord in one way or other, then you will see that gradually your focus or your attention towards Lord increases day by day by day. So similarly happens with the lamp. So if it doesn't waver, then you will see that the flame or it is not so, it's not if you put your hand on top of that flame, that you won't feel that much heat, but if the lamp is steady, then you will feel the intensity of the heat. So similarly, if you keep focusing on the Lord through your various senses, or perform services for the Lord, then you will see the intensity of that service, or the reciprocation you will get by that service would increase. So these are 4 verses together. So we will read one by one. Yatra paramate chittam niruddham yoga sevaya yatra chaivatmanatmanam pashyan atmani tushyatihi तुष्यति सुखम अत्यंतम यत्तद् बुद्धिग्राह्यम अतीन्द्रियम वेत्ति यत्र न चैवायम स्थितश्चलति तत् स्थितश्चलति तत्त्वतः यम लब्ध्वा च परम लाभम मन्यते नाधिकं ततः तस्मिन् स्थितो न दुःखेन गुरुनापि विचल्यते। तम विद्यात् दुख संयोग वियोगम योग संजितम। So, in the stage of perfection called trance or samadhi, one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities by the practice of yoga. This perfection is characterized by one's ability to see the self by the pure mind and to relish and rejoice in the self. In the joyous state, one is situated in the boundless transcendental happiness, realized through transcendental senses. Established thus, one never departs from the truth, and upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain. So, this is an important statement which we should pause upon and ponder, that established thus, one never departs from truth, and upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain. Being situated in such a position, one is never shaken even in the midst of greatest difficulty. So, one is never shaken even in the midst of greatest difficulty. This indeed is actual freedom from all miseries arising from material contact. So, we always think about getting rid of difficulties and getting rid of inconveniences, but here this verse says that one who achieves the topmost stage of yoga, which is you are fully connected with Lord, or you have your focus fully set on Lord himself, or you, in plain simple words, your whole and soul or the goal of your life is only to service Lord in one way or the other, then you receive or you feel so much happiness, and by performing that you feel so much happiness that you never want to you don't think about any other gains, or you are not moved by any losses, and this is actually the actual freedom, because whatever ups and downs are coming in your life, you are not moved by this at all. So for people like us who are only practicing this, we might not understand it or we might not realize it, but if we see examples of devotees of Lord, then we would understand, or we can acknowledge it better. So there are countless examples. Let's take example of Prahlad Maharaj, who was a great devotee of Lord Vishnu from his very childhood, but his father always wanted to punish him because of his devotional attitude towards Lord Vishnu, and even to the extent that he wanted to kill his son. He wanted to and he devised various ways. He threw him off the cliff of a mountain. He put him in a dungeon which was full of snakes. He made him drink poison. So he tried all his ways, but Prahlad Maharaj, the little boy of 5-year-old, he never deviated from the worship of Lord Vishnu, because he was feeling so much transcendental happiness and so much of enthusiasm that he kept on serving Lord Vishnu through all the difficulties of which his father was putting him into. And then we would further read about Prahlad Maharaj when we reach Srimad Bhagavatam, but we might have heard about Prahlad Maharaj. And then there was another great devotee of Lord Krishna who was born only around 500 years ago. His name was Haridasa Thakur, and although he was born in a Muslim family, but he was so attracted to chanting the names of the Lord that he used to chant around 192 rounds every day. So 192 rounds, it would take around somewhere around 18 to 20 hours a day to complete those 192 rounds, and he used to do every day. So that was his love for the names of the Lord, that was his devotion for the Lord. And but because he was a Muslim, then that's why that time, it was because 500 years ago Bengal was ruled by Muslim kings. So Muslim king threatened him that if you keep chanting the name of a Hindu god, then we would punish you severely, we would even give you death punishment. So Haridas Thakur very gently, very humbly said that even if you cut my body into hundreds of pieces, still I won't stop chanting. And although he was not given death punishment, but he was given a very similar punishment to that. So he was beaten in 22 marketplaces. So he was beaten with what we call in Hindi as chabuk. So he was beaten with chabuk at 22 marketplaces, 22. But he kept on chanting the names of Lord Krishna, and he was because he was himself so happy, and he was chanting the names of Lord Krishna, rather than having any vengeance for those who were punishing him by beating him in 22 marketplaces. He constantly prayed to Lord for so that these two, the ignorant punishment givers, are forgiven. They are not punished by the Lord. So such was the level of happiness he was, that even though his body was being beaten, he was seeking mercy for those for the punishment givers. So from these examples we can understand. There are countless of examples. Like people would have heard about Mother Mirabai or Sant Tukaram, who had come in the recent past, in the last 500 to 800 years ago, and then they were great devotees of Lord, and they had various difficulties in their life. They led their life in very challenging moments of medieval India, but still they worshipped Lord Krishna with all their heart and all their soul. So this gives us a hint that if we are really engaged in the service of Lord, then we would definitely get that reciprocation from Lord. And since Lord is the reservoir of all happiness, so imagine the reciprocation we will get from someone like Supreme Lord. So this is what is mentioned in this verse, and we can realize it by hearing about these exalted devotees of Lord. सनिश्चयेन योक्तव्यो योग अनिर्विण्ण चेतसः संकल्प प्रभवान् कामांस त्यक्त सर्वान् अशेषतः मनस एव इंद्रिय ग्रामं विनियम्य समन्ततः. One should engage oneself in the practice of yoga with determination and faith, and not to be deviated from the path. One should abandon without exception all material desires born of mental speculation, and thus control all the senses on all sides by the mind. So again, here is an instruction that we should have determination, we should have a faith which is not moved by day-to-day circumstances, and we should control our mind, we should control all the senses by our mind. So again, there is an instruction that we should always have this kind of regulation, that or a self-discipline, that we are determined on this path, and we are having a faith which is not moved. Now for this, although in day-to-day life we may get disheartened during the practice, so we may say that we have been chanting chanting for so many years and we have been reading books, but still I don't get the taste. So for that, what we need to do is we need to keep on doing the process, and also we should associate with people who are like-minded, because when we associate with the similar people who are also on this path, who are following these practices, then we would get encouragement, and we would also we say sometime in science that I got the vibe from that person. So similarly, if we associate with a devotee, we would get those devotional vibes. So it is very important to associate with devotees, to hear from devotees, to go to temple, and in this way, and in these days, if we are not able to go to a temple, then we should try to, at home we should try to follow these practices and try to connect with devotees or listen to their podcast, and similarly we would be able to maintain our enthusiasm. शनै शनै उपरमेत् बुद्ध्या धृतिगृहीतया आत्मसंस्थं मनः कृत्वा न किंचित् अपि चिन्तयेत्. So gradually, step by step, one should become suited in the trance by means of intelligence sustained by full conviction, and thus the mind should be fixed on the self alone and should think of nothing else. So again, as this verse explains, that this process doesn't fructifies in a day or two, so it takes time, but we should have full conviction in this process, because this process is mentioned by Lord Krishna himself. So we are getting the supreme assurance, and thus we gradually move towards this path. We gradually move on this path with and at a stage we would be able to fix our full attention on service of Lord Krishna, and thus we would be able to get rid of all the other things which are of no use, like we are too much attached to this material body, or we are too much attached to the position, or we are constantly thinking about all these things, things which are related to this body, or things which are related to this material universe, which are not going to be of any help, because this body, this material universe, everything is temporary. So once we fix our mind on or once we fix ourselves in the service of Lord, then gradually these things, these thoughts would wither away. Verse 26. Yato yato nishchalati manah chanchalam asthiram tata tato niyamhetad atman eva vasam nayet. Vasham nayet. From wherever the mind wanders due to its flickering and unsteady nature, one must certainly withdraw it and bring it back under the control of the self. So again we understand that mind would wander away, mind would think about sense gratification, or mind would get defocused, but again we should try to bring it back and try to take it under our control, because we have read in previous verses that if we can control our mind, then mind is our best friend, and if we cannot, then mind is our enemy. So it is better that we try to keep it under our control. Verse 27. Prashanta manasam hyenam yoginam sukhamuttamam upayati shantarajasam brahma bhutam akalmasham. The yogi whose mind is fixed on me verily attains the highest perfection of transcendental happiness. He is beyond the mode of passion. He realizes his qualitative identity with the Supreme, and thus he is freed from all material reactions to past deeds. So Lord Krishna himself is assuring that one who is fully focused on the service of Lord, fixed on me, attains the highest perfection. Attaining the highest perfection means to live in the same planet where Lord Krishna is residing, and always be in close association with Lord, Lord of all the things, Lord of all the all happiness, Lord of all potencies. So imagining you are day in and day out, you are associating with the Lord. So that is the highest perfection you will receive. and as a byproduct, if you are associating with Lord, that means that all your past, all the reactions of your past deeds have been nullified, and that is why you are able to go to that spiritual universe where you are associating with the Lord. Verse 28. Yunjan evam sadatmanam yogi vigata kalmashah sukhena brahma samsparsham atyantam sukham ashnute. Thus the self-controlled yogi, constantly engaged in yoga practice, becomes free from material contamination and achieves the highest stage of perfect happiness in transcendental loving service to the Lord. So again, a similar thought, or a similar a verse with a similar meaning is here. It says that if we are always engaged in the yoga practice, as we understood in a couple of verses ago, that if we are engaging our different senses or our different inclinations in the service of Lord in one way or other, then gradually we will become free from all material contaminations, and we would achieve the highest stage of perfection, which is the not only living in the association of Lord, but able to serve the Lord in one way or the other. So in this world we can see that how love is, or the feeling of the love is the thing which binds us. I mean, in our different relationships, let it be our parents or our kith and kin or our spouse or children, we have this feeling of love which binds us to these various relationships and makes our life joyful. So similarly, if we can just think of we can glimpse of the supreme happiness if you are in the loving service with the Lord. Maybe you have Lord Krishna as your friend or Lord Krishna as your son, so we cannot even imagine the amount of happiness you would get in having those relationships and in living in those relationships. सर्वभूतस्थम आत्मानं सर्वभूतानि चात्मनि इक्षते योगयुक्तात्मा सर्वत्र समदर्शनः. A true yogi observes me in all beings and also sees every being in me. Indeed, the self-realized soul, self-realized person sees me, the same Supreme Lord, everywhere. So, for a person who is always thinking about Lord Krishna, he would always see Lord Krishna everywhere, and he would see and in every living being he would see the super soul or the Paramatma feature of Lord Krishna. So this is an indication of a true yogi. So which is that he would always see Lord Krishna everywhere, and especially in living beings he would see Lord Krishna as the super soul. In everywhere else he would see Lord Krishna in the Brahman form, which is invisible to us, but it's a ethereal form of Lord Krishna, and thus he sees Lord Krishna in all the things, in all the people, and this is the perfect vision of a true yogi. Verse 30. So what is now Lord Krishna would describe that what is the result of one who is always seeing Lord Krishna, who is in everything he is remembering Lord Krishna. So he says, Yo mam pashyati sarvatra sarvam chamai pashyati tasyaham na pranashyami sacha me na pranashyati. For one who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, I am never lost, nor is he ever lost to me. So that means that one who sees Lord Krishna, one who remembers Lord Krishna all the time, the Lord never forgets that devotee. So through whatever situation the devotee goes, the Lord is always protecting that devotee. And because although Lord is the Supreme Father for all the living beings, but the son or the daughter who is totally dependent or who is always thinking about the Lord will care for him. Lord will try to protect him more. He would actually protect him. I mean, just give an example of a normal or a biological father or a biological mother, that they try to protect all their sons and daughters. They try to protect all their care for all the sons and daughters. But the son or the daughter who is like who is uh, who is most dependent on them is the one for whom their care is the most, because the father and the mother knows that this son or daughter of mine is cannot be self dependent. So that's why their care is more for that son or daughter. So similarly, for Lord Krishna, who is the Supreme Father, if a devotee is, or if a son or daughter of his is always thinking about Lord Krishna or always depending on Lord Krishna and seeing Lord Krishna everywhere, then Lord Krishna would take special care of that devotee. So we have already we are already over the time, so we would stop here, and I hope we meet again next week. Till then, Hare Krishna.